Okay, hello. It's Mark Taylor here from Patient Led Oncology. We've got an amazing story here today to talk about, and it's someone still on their journey. Quite often we talk about complete responses. This is not necessarily a complete response, although Helen's doing really well. It's really a story of some successes, some challenges, and really, but a lot of things going on that I think people can learn from. So, Helen, welcome.
Hi, yeah, thanks. It's good to be here. I think it's nice
Um,
to share my story.
And yeah, do you want to give? I know you've been on a long journey. It's complex, so do you want to just give a bit of indication as to how it started and explain how your journey got to today?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed in July 2024. I was breastfeeding my youngest, and I had pain when I was breastfeeding, and everyone just assumed I'd had mastitis before, and we presumed it was mastitis. But I went to a nurse and discovered that it was not mastitis. There was a lump, and they diagnosed me as having triple negative um, breast cancer. And then following a scan, we found out that it was stage three at that point.
And then
So
and then what you
then we did mainstream paclitaxel and pembrolizumab chemo for 6 months, which led to on PET, it was complete, like no evidence of disease on PET scan, which was good. We then did, then we had, when they did the operation, I had a mastectomy and full lymph clearance. And then they found that there was tiny amounts of remaining cancer in my lymph nodes and in my breast. But it was just not metabolically active at the time, which is why it'd been missed at in the scan. So at that point, we sort of knew that things were a lot more serious. Then I was feeling super optimistic sort of until that point. Followed by radiotherapy, and in theory, I was cancer free until July when I noticed a lump in my neck, which is where there had previously been cancer, but they hadn't taken it out at that point, and it just revved up again after the radiotherapy. So they put me on Enhertu.
and yeah, and this is when things got a bit difficult, right? So and at this point, you still weren't looking at alternative medicine, right? You were kind of following standard of care. Um, and
Well, I've been doing a little bit of extra stuff. So when I first was diagnosed, I contacted Synthesis Clinic and worked with Dr. Emma there. And importantly, I worked with their EFT coach, Aga.
oh, okay.
I can't remember her surname. And I feel like the EFT was super helpful because before that, my anxiety prior diagnosis was very high. Um, I had environmental based anxiety. And yeah, if you can look at your your route of where you've got to, I imagine that certainly wasn't helping my immune system. So I'd done little bits with them on the mind body stuff, and I was taking a few supplements, but I hadn't considered anything off the mainstream other than that. No.
I want to, interestingly, EFT was one of the first things I did as well. And it was when I was a non-believer in alternative medicine, and I was taken aback by the powerfulness of it. Do you want to just, some of the listeners won't know what it is. Do you want to just give a quick 2-minute overview of how it works?
Yeah, so it's called emotional freedom technique, and basically you tap certain points on your face and on other parts of your body if you need to, which are generally these points. Whilst talking, I mean, I imagine there's different techniques, but what I've done is we talk about the things that are triggering for me, and whilst doing that, and tapping brings down your body's reaction to that, so that then next time you come up and you're thinking about the triggers, you're not having the same bodily reaction. And definitely, I mean, I'd done a tiny bit of tapping prior. And when my children had been annoying, I used to tap occasionally in the car, so I knew that that was something that work for me, and I quite quickly can yawn and feel my body relaxing when I do it. But doing it with someone and like working through the things that I found, like I found the term aggressive whenever I read about triple negative. I still don't like it. The triple negative breast cancer, the word aggressive with it was like I would go cold,
Oh,
and I
wow.
just get really like a really bodily reaction. And through working with AGA, yeah, I mean, we moved past that point, and I was able to read about the research a bit more.
Okay. And did you do the grading of the sensation and like go down from 10, 9? Did you ever do that? That was what I found really fascinating is that I would grade emotions and then we'd tap and then it would go from like an 8 intensity to a 7 to a 6 to a 5. And then I think once that's how my therapist worked with me. And then that stayed with me to this day, in that you can like degrade any emotion. Anything we went through, we could get rid of. And I think it's kind of interesting. I coach with a lot of patients, and I've been through that journey, and I had no idea about it. But still, a lot of people are unaware that these tools exist. That they're almost automatic in how they work in depleting like the stresses around certain emotional triggers. So
It's incredible.
yeah.
It's an incredible thing.
Um, and so you mentioned your first entry into alternative medicine was synthesis. How did you find out about them? What was your entry into?
Um, I mean, when you first get diagnosed, you're just thrown so much stuff, and there's a lot of crazy things. There's a lot of things on social media, and it's really hard to pick what is real crazy versus what is like has got something to it. And I found it incredibly overwhelming, combined with not being able to read anything about it. And I think I imagine I may have used AI
Oh,
to
okay.
just throw me subjects that were more mainstream. And I read about Nina, and she just seemed mainstream enough. Like I knew that there'd be integrative stuff that I could do that could help because I knew enough about biology to know that there was more. And I'd had my aunt had the same breast cancer, triple negative, when in the 80s, and I knew that she'd beaten it. She's in her 80s now, so she got through it. And they thought she was going to die. And I knew that she'd done that with the help of Chinese medicine and
Okay.
integrative stuff. So I knew that there was something in that, but I was also really scared of doing anything too crazy and like ruining my mainstream treatment. And synthesis seemed like a really good balance in between like some mainstream and some alternative based on their CVs.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. And you did some testing with them as well. So that's correct, right?
Yeah, I did data testing. So initially I did a data blood biopsy, and then I followed that up a little bit later with the, an analysis of the remaining bit of my tumor from my mastectomy.
I'm just going to share the data test, and that's okay now, just because there's a lot of people out there won't have heard of functional profiling. So it's a combination of like genetic information from the tumor as well as sensitivities where they test drugs against the tumor. And so this is your test, and I mean, it does test standard of care medicine, but that's not how you used it, right? So it also tests off-label drugs and supplements, and propranolol was top. And because of this, you were given a few drugs by synthesis, right, to match this test.
Yeah, there were a few off labels and a couple of supplements that we added. They'd already put me on melatonin, but it was reassuring. And propranolol, I was actually already on, but I was a
Okay.
little bit umming about it because my blood pressure was low. But we've kept with it because it's obvious that it's a useful thing to have. And I think my mainstream oncologist also found it useful in terms of like making plans. And another thing about it was reassuring. I believe it was in that one that was reassuring that they felt that actually you may want to take this bit out because actually I think they thought that it was shown that Enhertu was going to work because it one of the sensitivities, so they were quite sure that there was a drug that was related, but Enhertu didn't work. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they can't directly test Enhertu, and I don't know the technical reason why, but
Is it related?
what's that? Sorry.
Is topotecan somehow related?
Um,
I
uh,
feel like
Possibly. It might be the
anyway,
same receptors used. So yeah. So is that what they were looking at for?
I
Uh,
can't remember now.
yeah. Okay. And then so you started in HER2. So you were doing okay. You thought you were in remission then, but there was some semblance of cancer left in the lymph nodes. It came back, and then you were put on HER2, right? And how did that go?
Well, I was sold Enhertu as like a wonder drug. And I'd heard amazing stories about it, and my breast care nurse was like full of enthusiasm. She was like, "Oh, it's so amazing that you're HER2 low because you've got this drug." And I was like, and I genuinely thought we were going to go on it, and I was going to be on it for years, and it would give me time to sort of do other things, and it didn't, it didn't work for me at all, which I wasn't quite fully mentally prepared for. So my cancer continued to progress, and I had a rash develop quite quickly around my chest area, chest wall, and the lymph nodes continued to grow. So we did, I think, 3 rounds of Enhertu, did a scan. It was quite not massively worse, but significantly worse. And then we switched to Trodelvy.
Okay. And that it was around then that you contacted me. How did you actually, how did you get to know about me? What was the,
So I'm not entirely sure. It's a really interesting thing. I mean, in part of the general journey, I I'd worked with a radical remission coach who'd opened my eyes to slightly more alternative things. So having been comfortable with synthesis and got the idea of some integrative stuff, the radical remission coach, and generally I still work on those 9 steps. What she opened my eyes to slightly more alternative things. So I joined a few Facebook groups, and I think somebody mentioned you in a Facebook group.
okay.
And then I joined the group, and then I followed a couple of things. Mm.
And then I think it was about the time you were going on to Tadalvi, we had the consult. Um, was around then at the start, I believe. Um,
Yeah. I think I was like maybe nearer the beginning of my Enhertu.
oh, okay.
I remember thinking because we started talking about the vaccine, and in my head there was no urgency because I was an Enhertu and I didn't need to rush because everything was going to be all right.
Yeah, yeah. And we were talking about vaccines, and next gen testing, I believe, is another thing we were kind of considering.
Mhm.
But it was at that stage you didn't do anything, right? It wasn't until you stopped working that you started looking for other things.
Mm, yeah, around that time, I think I started to rev up to do the vaccine. I definitely had decided to do it. Whether I'd press go, I think I definitely things got a lot faster once we realised things weren't working, and I'd switched to Trodelvy for sure.
Yeah. Um, and I remember I'm going to bring it up because I think it's a really it's an interesting topic that comes up a lot. We were discussing things. Ivermectin was a big topic. Um, and I would send you research, and we'd have a dialogues about trust. It's like, who do I know what to trust? You're getting differing opinions from people, and I would say read the research. And at the time, you were struggling with research, and you said you used EFT to try and help you read the research. As you were saying earlier, I think it was the aggressive triple negative breast cancer that triggered you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's been stages to the EFT and me and research journey. Like at the beginning, I couldn't read anything about it at all, not even on like the mainstream, cancer charity websites. And then we'd sort of worked through that. And then when it got to you, like I still couldn't read very easily, or at all, actually. When I first started working with you, I couldn't read proper research, as in a research paper. The only way I could do it would be to put it in Perplexity or like another AI and get it to like summarize it without those terms. Um, and then I realized working with you that actually the only way of getting through this is that I needed to read it. So I did a lot more EFT around it, and downgraded my anxiety to a point where I could. And trust was a massive thing because I was like, who is this person that's, I mean, there's so many people out there that say that they're cancer experts,
Yeah,
and you read about them and then you read their stuff, and there's just, and it's really hard. And like you were telling me to read the research, but also I have two children,
yeah,
young children that need a lot of care. And I was feeling really ill because I had like cancer that was quite quickly progressing, and I was on a chemo that wasn't like, and hurting made me feel awful. Um, it was just, yeah, like trust is a really hard part of this journey, I think, because you've got to have some. I couldn't have read as much research as you in the time period to have caught up. So there was always an element of trust. And I struggled with that, but you were very patient with me pushing back.
I mean, it's a big topic because it comes up a lot. I see it in patients, and what I see in a lot of people is that um, if you don't have a model for gaining trust, what I see people do is they go from one person to another person to another person to another person, and they get different information from everyone. And if
Mm,
you're just taking an opinion from lots of people, what in almost all cases, I see patients who are continually confused. Because if you've got so much information coming from many places, and there are so many options to do, that if you cannot decipher research, there's no way of navigating all the options. You know, so. Um, and I don't think that was the early conversations we were having, and people sometimes have a view that I have a view on what someone should do, and I don't necessarily have a protocol behind me. What I'm trying to do is create a movement where patients are empowered to make their own decisions. With the portal we're building, the chatbot, the encouragement of ways to actually read research, using Perplexity as you're doing. Actually, I'd love to show your work on Perplexity a bit later. I think you're even proposing to do some YouTubes of you showing how to do Perplexity.
yeah, yeah, I'd like to. I think I need to perfect it a little bit myself, but I think there's a lot to be done, and it can speed things up.
Yeah,
And with the counter that you can't really trust it 100% because sometimes it will just
yeah,
randomly.
yeah,
An
yeah.
example the other day, I came up, and I didn't fact check this. I came up, it's synthesis, not synthesis, sorry, perplexity. Too many words. Suggested this really good drug for my lymphocytes, and without any and it said, would you like me to write you an email for your oncologist? And without any fact checking, it wrote me an email, and I sent it to my oncologist. And when I saw him yesterday, he went, the website for this drug you've suggested, it looks like a child's maybe made it. And I was like, I looked at it with him, I was like, yeah, I'm really sorry, I didn't fact check before sending
Yeah, it's a
it.
very, very good point. Even the stuff you sent over, we checked it for some errors, and that is and that is a really, really topical thing because I'm working with a lot of patients these days, and people are relying on AI engines a lot, and it can be very helpful, but you have to have that extra level of questioning of everything. And you have to go through and read the research and infer, and that's really the hard work, is because if something's only 90% correct, you can have big problems. And unfortunately, that's where AA is right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but when you're a patient and you're feeling ill and
Yeah, yeah,
stressed, and like everyone's lives are busy before they get cancer, it's really hard to find the time
yeah,
to really hit the research hard. But it's the world we're in, that unfortunately that it is up to us to figure out our own paths.
yeah. I mean, I think what your story is really a good one because now I'm working with you and you're doing your own research and it's super impressive. It's really nice to watch someone who couldn't read a research paper and is now. I think I will try and present some of the analysis you did using our research portal, and it's super advanced and it's very impressive to the levels that someone can get to with a bit of effort in that regard. And I think it's fun that for I follow a lot of patients, and there's a general trend for patients to do the popular stuff, and there's a lot of people out there, in my opinion, who if they were able to sort of really understand research, a lot of people I think don't even have the awareness that there's research out there that can help them, that they think this world is just relying on opinion of others. And I think that's where mistakes
Mm.
get made. Um, and I think at that one point, I want to segue into, we discussed a few things at that stage where you were progressing, and I sent you, I think it was I sent you that study with the MICU mob and radiation, and I
Yeah.
And I want to present this one because I think for others with triple negative or any breast cancer, actually, it's not specific to, or anyone actually specifically with skin mets. This is an incredibly powerful and relatively simple thing to do. So I'm presenting the study now, and it's basically radiotherapy with a toll-like receptor agonist called imiquimod, which you can buy relatively cheaply and rub on the skin. Um, and the results are really amazing. So this is, it's not standard of care. It was done in this trial. 31 patients were involved, but there were two complete responses in stage 4 patients and two partial responses, and a large proportion did respond. So do you want to talk about like how that went? So I think I sent you that paper, and then I actually introduced you to a couple that I work with that were already doing it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and going back to the trust thing, I think that made a really big difference just to know somebody else that was going through it. Although obviously in reality, that's very anecdotal stuff to know that one person's halfway through a treatment. It just felt like it made it more real and it made it less of a abstract thing.
yeah.
So yeah, I went weekly to Munich for 6 weeks for low dose. I have a puppy that's biting
No,
me.
it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. That's good healing.
Yeah, she is very healing, other than the bite. Um, yeah, I went to Munich for low dose radiotherapy, combined with hypothermia, and then I applied the imiquimod myself, and the response was really, really, really good. Like my chest wall had quite an aggressive rash, and it was painful. Like especially post Trodelvy, you could feel the inflammation. Like I couldn't. It got to a point where I couldn't really do much exercise with that shoulder. And now it looks absolutely normal. Like I think it looks the best it's looked since before they operated on it, really. So
Yeah.
my oncologist got the opinion that he was really, really impressed. Like he thought it was an interesting, fun thing I was doing in Munich, but he's really impressed with how it looks. And he's pretty sure that it's a combination of the Trodelvy and that.
Yeah. So this was, I think this was a scar beforehand, right? So I'm just processing it now, and now
Mhm.
it's just completely gone, right? You've got nothing. Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
really we'll send her a
yeah,
lymph node.
just yeah.
And equally, the people we introduced you to, they had a very strong response as well. So and they they would run out of all options and got to a similar state, I think, of like near complete removal of the tumors after that treatment.
Mm.
They're still battling, but I think out of all the things that I know of in this world, given the chance, because what it's really doing, this combination is a vaccine. It's destroying the tumor, creating antigens with the radiation, low dose radiation. So it's not like nowhere near as intense as high dose radiation, which can be pretty brutal for some people. And then this cream, you got the cream. Where did you get the cream from?
I got the cream online.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Um,
an online pharmacy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but so it's a fairly innocuous thing to do. But it gives people a chance I mean, if people get a chance to read the study, there's a chance of a cure for a lot of people, and you're getting a vaccine type effect,
Mm.
which is I know at that point you'd already decided to get a vaccine made with NextGen, I believe. Um,
Mhm.
um, and also it helped regress the cancer to a very you've only got stuff now in the lymph nodes, right, that you're now battling against. That you're
Yeah, yeah. I've just got like a tiny amount in one lymph node.
Yeah,
So whether whether there was a bit of a vaccine effect and whether that's helped my lymphs or whether it's a Trodelvy, either way, I don't think I would have been. I definitely wouldn't have been at this. Like I'm going into having the vaccine at a really low level of disease, and that wouldn't have been the case without that treatment.
yeah. And then what I um, what I want to do now is also look at your next gen actually, because you sent your tumor biopsy, and I think that was you didn't have but biopsying was difficult, right? So we chose to use an old biopsy. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. We initially tried to run it on my mainstream had taken a small biopsy of my chest just when I first had a recurrence to see if if the rash actually was anything cancerous, and it was. So we tried to run the next gen stuff on that, but there wasn't enough data. So I think the Panther report is based on my chest wall, but the actual vaccine will be made from my mastectomy, the last little bits from my
Okay.
mastectomy.
Okay, I'm gonna show you a next gen report. I think it's interesting. I mean, um, I think the few things that kind of quite interesting is how infiltrated your tumor was with immune cells, um, and then next gen they give a score for how immunogenic it is, and your score was 98, which is a very high score. So it's suggesting it's it's already potentially responsive to immunotherapy. Um, and then um, the other interesting thing, there was a topic about whether you do ivermectin. Now with triple negative, there is a study actually there's a very promising study in mice, and I think a fair percentage were cured with the combination of ivermectin plus checkpoints. But you'd already finished your pembro at this point, right? So you'd missed the opportunity to use ivermectin with pembro
Well, I hadn't because I'd finished my Pembro, but I didn't finish it until August. So there was still some remaining in my
a little
system.
bit, yeah.
So yeah, when I was taking I did do a round of ivermectin. And it was in my head that I was probably hopefully combining the two a little bit
Yeah,
because
and I think oh yeah, okay, yeah. So you had a lot going on. I mean, you had Trodelvy, you had the radiation, you had ivermectin, and I think this is another interesting thing because in this I'll bring up the study soon, but this test from NextGen, it's the only one I know that checks for these genes, and these genes correlate with immunogenic cell death caused by ivermectin. And I think in this mice study, one of the mice was cured just with ivermectin alone, and then I think that was 1 out of 20, but I think around a quarter were cured in combination with ivermectin and checkpoint inhibitors. And this is the study. There has been a human study done, but it was on very late stage patients, and they're still running the report. There was one very impressive partial response, and but the full report's not out. But this ivermectin checkpoint study is one of the most powerful out there, and I see a lot of people getting complete responses actually who with triple negative who follow this. This it's hard to read here, but basically these lines here indicate like on the purple line and the blue line complete regression of the tumor in some mice. And then they did a tumor re-challenge on the mice, and basically no tumor grew. So it's kind of indicating that the ivermectin had vaccinated the mice, and these survival curves, pretty impressive for that segment. Yeah, but you've not yet. There's been a long debate about whether when to start checkpoints. You're on Trodelvy right now. You've done the radiation. Things are going well. And then you've done so much. It's that's why it's such a great story. And then you went to see Saimbas to do oncolytic viruses. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, yeah. So last week, which feels like a long time ago now, I went to Dusseldorf to Sahindbus to do an oncolytic virus. So the process for that is that they put you in a CT scanner, and they map where the lymph nodes are that they want to inject, and then they very carefully they map it, and then they check that the needles are right, and then they inject you with an oncolytic virus. So my hope is that that will prime my immune system a little bit in preparation to the vaccine, the neoantigen vaccine that is still being made. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm going to combine that with local and whole body hypothermia as well.
Okay. Yeah, and it's worth noting people like again, it's another angle that people just aren't aware of because it's not a popular treatment. There's not many places that do it. Interestingly, it's standard of care for brain tumors and glioblastoma in Japan right now. But it's you're funny. You get these situations where people I know are looking for glioblastoma solutions. Um, Going back to this trust issue, despite the fact that you tell them that standard of care in Japan, they're still wary about trying to get it done in Europe. Obviously, it's a complicated procedure, but And it's saying there's more and more of this stuff going through clinical trials. So I think these
Mm.
things start becoming more popular as they do.
I mean, I think I've been really lucky with my mainstream oncologist and having synthesis there is like my sort of in between, that I run these crazy ideas past them before before I jet off to Germany or jet off to somewhere. And yeah, I mean, and this is testament to your suggestions or the things that I'm finding through the portal, is that the things that I'm proposing to them and then going off to do, the mainstream people are saying, yes, that seems a sensible thing to do. Like that would be helping you on your immunotherapy journey. They're not just like crazy ideas that I'm just randomly doing.
Yeah.
And that helps me feel trust for the process as well.
Yeah, totally. And you know, I'm actually I speak to a lot of patients. A lot get frustrated with their oncologist. The majority are, but I think you know there are a small number, I'd say less than 5%, who has a very open-minded oncologist. And I think yours was even indicating the vaccine was a good idea.
Yeah, totally. He's
Yeah,
completely behind the vaccine. Yeah.
yeah. That's a very rare. I'm starting to see a shift. It's very interesting because I've been doing this job 6 years now, and at the start of it, it was like fundamental no's everywhere. You know, don't even go there. Some of the senior guys, certainly on the private areas in the UK, are starting now to sort of open the doors to more like testing, trying things that are in tests. In South Africa, I've got a patient who's like basically asking the patient, "What do you want?" And there's another patient in Canada, the same, and there are pockets in America as well. But we're talking like ten oncologists, but I'm seeing the number increase. So I think we're entering a world where they're having to an acceptance that these things exist outside of standard of care, and I think we're observing that switch, and that's interesting for patients. For most in the NHS, I don't think they get a choice. You know, they're going to be forced through a system. But if you are in a position to choose your oncologist, I think it's worth thinking about, or even asking around for patients who are going through similar treatments if they're finding oncologists who are more open, because it makes a big
Yeah.
difference when you can. Yeah.
For sure.
And then do you want to talk about now? Now you're going through a bit of a difficult period in terms of decision making. Do you want to talk, because I think I love these because they're all topical. These come up a lot. Do you want to talk about, you know, some of the decision making on, you know, the side effects you're having with Trodelvy, some of your colitis risks, as your, you know, your thought structures on, you know, moving into an immunotherapy option down the line potentially?
Yeah. I mean, I I'm definitely struggling with decision making last week also. So the backstory to it would be that when I was on pembrolizumab, so a checkpoint inhibitor, last year, two reasons we came off it was because I had a bit of progression and because I had colitis. And arguably, potentially, the progression was because once I'd had the colitis, I was put on steroids, which dampened my immune system, which was probably messing with things a little bit. It's hard to know where it was, but the point is that now I want to have a neoantigen vaccine, start it, and then start some checkpoint. In an ideal world, I'd be then starting some checkpoints and to be helping my immune system work through this. But the risk would be that if I re-challenge with checkpoint inhibitors, then my colitis could come back again.
Mm.
And then I would need to go back onto systemic steroids, and then my immune system would be dampened. And would I just be undoing all the benefit I'm having of having the vaccine? And it's a risk thing. And when you've got like a trial full of hundreds of people, you can try these things out. But when you're the one person,
Mm.
um, it's a hard thing to decide on. And like you said, different opinions. My mainstream oncologist is very sure that the risk for me isn't worth it. And then yeah, with side effects of Trodelvy, it's been generally okay. It was definitely much better than Enhertu to start with, but now I'm getting some gut problems and mast cell activation, and I've had a couple of fairly serious allergy responses, not to the drug, but to other things that I'm not normally allergic to. So there's something going on in my body, and it just is showing signs of being on a really intense treatment for quite a few months. And just trying to make sense of all the balance, all the different options that are out there, and what would be best in my case is a hard thing to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up. I mean, these discussions and decisions are not abnormal, particularly when you enter this world. You know, when you're on standard of care, it's fairly simple. You're on
Yeah.
the same path, and that's it. When you enter this world of integrative oncology, you end up in a risk-based decision model, and yeah, that's not easy. You have to weigh pros and cons of everything, and mm, yeah, and I don't think anyone can make that decision but yourself, right? It's not something you can outsource
Yeah.
to ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously
And
with
I think there's something about it for me that I just needed to park things more.
yeah,
Like or like my at the moment, I just want to get to the point, get to the vaccine, do that, and then see how that's going, and then I can reassess. And yeah, it's important for your mental health to park things
yeah,
because you can't just be like ruminating
yeah,
about
so true. Yeah, true.
problems every day.
Yeah, that's a good skill. And then do you want to talk about your white blood cell issues as well, which is very common?
Yeah, my lymphocytes
Yeah.
are low. They I was looking at them the other day when we were discussing it, and I came out of Main Street like the hardcore chemo, and they were 0.54 or something. But it seems the radiation. So I had my operation, then I did my radiation, then they were down to 0.24 or something. So and they've crept back up to the zero point 0.3 level, but it's still really quite low. And for those listening that don't know, because I didn't know until recently, that your lymphocyte is level is quite indicative of how well immunotherapy is going to work. So it's important to get it up. And it seems like there's not a lot of options other than coming off um, Trodelvy and then going on to something lighter. That would be pretty much the only option to raise them. So if anybody wants to design a drug in the next 2 months
Yeah,
to
well, we did look
raise,
at, so there is this new drug, Anktiva from Immunity Bio. It's getting a press with Patrick soon in the US, and I think it's now standard of care in the FDA for lymphopenia. But in the UK, I think we looked at the private costs, and it's 40,000 a dose per month, right? It's 40,000 US dollars. Yeah.
yeah. And I think like expected that you might need like 6 doses. When you said 40,000, I was like, oh, I guess if we really try hard on the GoFundMe, we could get to like 40,000. And then I was like, oh no, that's just for one dose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's out
Yeah.
of reach for
That's a bit
people like me.
crazy. Yeah, it really gives an indication of like, you know, the crazy money in oncology drugs. I mean, I'm a shareholder in Immunity Bio, but when I see that they're charging 40, I know the rationale because it was used in a bladder cancer thing, which can be curative, and like an intramural type injection with BCG vaccine, and that's their main entry for revenue, I guess, at the moment. And this lymphopenia became along secondary. But I think it would be good for them to really readdress that because I think, almost everyone I work with is having problems with lymphocytes. And, 40,000 a dose just doesn't work for people, and certainly even National Health Services can't afford that. So
Yeah.
I hope that they can rethink their pricing model to make that, affordable for people. Um, yeah, and then I mean we talked about fasting. There's some evidence of fasting, 3-day fast repairing stem cells, but it's kind of experimental. Um, and then you need to watch your waist. And then there's this iPSC by RGCC, but it's very experimental as well, and we don't have data on it. Yeah, it's a difficult
Yeah,
one.
it's in sort of a murky grey area a little bit where the research is patchier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
And
I mean,
then the fasting, it's hard, isn't it? If you've got like my weight has dropped, and
yeah,
I know the importance of having like that's another people I work with. I work with FitMed, who help me with my fitness around and really sell the idea of the importance of fitness and muscle strength, which I didn't. I'd done a little bit of weightlifting post diagnosis, but I've done a lot more. And the importance of that for your immune system is, and the research around it's really, really interesting and really important. And then that makes you worry a little bit about fasting. And yeah, I get all these decisions that you have to think about.
yeah. The white blood, it's a very common one. I mean, I work for a number of clinics, and we see people coming in generally later down their journey. Like very, very rarely that. I mean, it's an interesting. When I'm working with two clinics, one Art of Healing Cancer and the Valencia clinic, which is now called IconFem. And in the patients that are coming in early, we're getting complete responses in a fair proportion. In those that are coming late, it's much more difficult, partly because of the damage from a lot of the pre-treatments.
Mm.
Um, there's a big topic for this world in how do we inform people very early about these things. And I don't think we've got an answer, but I think for a major shift to occur, it's really getting this information early.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've started an Instagram account with the idea of doing that because I want to spread the idea. But I think it's even when people know, I wouldn't have had the confidence to have jumped ship until I felt like the ship was only sailing in one direction. Like
Yeah,
you're sold an idea when you first go to treatment, and we've all been brought up with the idea that, mainstream medicine's as good as it gets. So it's really hard for people to
yeah,
jump when they're sold an idea, and yeah, to jump off something that you think is going to help you
yeah.
is
Yeah,
challenging.
and it's certainly if you're stage three, it's still very curable at that stage, right? It's only when you get to stage four, it becomes the decision making comes a bit easier. But the emotional period where you need to make the decisions, it's too emotional, I think, for most people. Unless, in my observation, they already had a family member who's gone through it and they've learned, a friend or family member, and they know the information straight up and they can navigate
Yeah,
correctly. Yeah. Um, Okay, and then you're in the process of doing a GoFundMe. You're doing a lot, and I do my best to because not that I necessarily encourage GoFundMes, but I'll put this on the screen. But where there are certainly people pushing the science out and um, you got a family that there's very strong motivations to get hold of these things which can keep you alive. So I'll put this out there so people can see it, and I'll post it in the Facebook group so people can donate if they feel that they have the money to support you. And as you mentioned, you're going to start like an Instagram account and do some videos yourself.
yeah, yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing. I do feel, I mean, I already feel incredibly privileged to be able to afford like any additional treatments. So it was a really uncomfortable and a bit of a psychological jump for me to do a GoFundMe because I
Yeah,
already feel like I'm incredibly lucky to
yeah,
be able to get things. But then once you realize how expensive this world is, and I am essentially acting as a guinea pig. Like the more people that go through this process, the
exactly.
more
Yeah,
things that become available, and I think it's it's not a bad thing to be doing it.
well,
And
people.
when I post about it, I post as an offering that anybody that's going through cancer that can come to me. And I'm not an expert in any way, but I can definitely like signpost things. And there are things that I wish I'd known. Even just the mind body stuff is like massive in terms of like how it can help you navigate it and how it can help your body heal. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I think if somebody pointed me that in that direction earlier, it would have been good.
Yeah, yeah, and I like I when I talk to patients who are like maybe running out of options and maybe there is an experimental treatment out there that gives them a chance. Yeah, I think you can a lot of it's going through the shame of asking, but I think you can get over that by saying, look, when you truly understand how the current model works, a lot of these things aren't going to get into standard medicine, at least not the combination. The ivermectin checkpoint combination. It's very unlikely that we'll ever see that into standard of care because the money's just not there to fund an
Mm.
off-label drug. So the more and more patients who um, go through these things, try these things, and share their information, and that's what we're trying to do as an organization is capture this information. Um, that what I think we'll start to see soon is a crescendo because I think the knowledge is getting better and better, and I think we'll get more and more cases. I mean, and you're going in the right directions. Hopefully, you're that case in a year's time when we're talking about the miracles of the journey you went through. And then I think there'll be a big crescendo, and then I think that's how the HIV near cures happened. It was through the patients coming together and collectively solving the problem. And if GoFundMe is part of that way, then why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Is there anything else that we need to cover? I know that's a huge amount. Um, and we probably missed things. We've missed your transcendental meditation training, which I know you started.
Started this week. I mean,
Yeah.
meditation as a general thing has been like bubbling under the surface, and all the mental, the mind body stuff has been bubbling along. But yeah, transcendental meditation course started this week, which I've got another bit in about 10 minutes,
Okay.
which has been helpful. And I think, yeah, I guess the only other thing that I think was really helpful for me was like, which again is mind body stuff. It's like going through the radical remission steps and like really like envisaging like where I want to be and where is a healthy place for my body. I think all of those mind body stuff I think is really, really important, as
Yeah.
well as really fancy neoantigen
Yeah,
peptide vaccine.
yeah. And actually, one of the things I wanted to show people is the, you know, because I know you're going to do a an Instagram podcast or whatever about this, but just going to show your analysis using Perplexity. So do you want to talk about, yeah? So this is your analysis using it's super impressive. So do you want to explain sort of what you did to get this?
Yeah, you can see that that was before I realised how expensive Anktiva was because
Yeah,
that's in my.
yeah.
So yeah, basically I so Perplexity you can upload your documents. So I've uploaded my next gen, my data, my I've done some like DNA tests for my SNPs to see if there's some like supplements that don't really work for me or I'm like will cause my body too much stress. So I upload all of those and my case notes for my oncologist and like I think it's like 8 documents that I will load into Perplexity. And I also loaded the steps that are on your immunotherapy cycle of immunotherapy. Is that what
Yeah.
it's called?
From
Yeah,
the
circle of
portal.
immunotherapy. And I put those steps in. I've asked Perplexity basically to break down like and then I've put in so I put in different scenarios and ask it to say out of if I was to take this combination of things, which of these steps, like am I hitting all these steps? Are there any that are weak? Are there any that I could add more supplements to so that I can sort of get, because I was finding it really hard to keep in my head. And then I tried to make a spreadsheet and I was always updating it. And then I realized that's what AI is for, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's brilliant. When we saw this, I shared it with Gabrielle, and it's super interesting. So you used our Hacking Cancer research portal. We had the circle of immunotherapy, and then you broke down the drugs for each section. You know, it's very impressive. And how have you found the research portal? Has it been useful?
Yeah, massively so. Because before I was just reading like bits and bobs of like you can read a paper here and a paper there, and like just to have had it all put together, like the most recent research put together and like broken down in slightly more layman's terms. I'm lucky I've got a biology degree, so some of it was like I had a slight head start above some people that some of the terminology was vaguely familiar. But yeah, like it was incredible. Like my ability to catch up was, I don't know, saved me months and months. And whether I don't think I'd have got to where I've got to without the portal, to be honest.
But it's great to know that it can be useful. So yeah, for those that are interested, it's hackingcancer health, and it's a 19.99 a month plus the chatbot. And we're planning to build in more functionality at the moment as well. So
Which is
um,
sweet. I think if we could post things into the chatbot, then that would be really good.
yeah, that's the plan. Yeah, we're looking to build like what you've done. So what you've done in Perplexity, we know some doctors doing some similar, but obviously there's some data concerns around doing that. So we're looking to build like an
Yeah,
equivalent so that, you know, everyone's doctor's files are stored. They can use the chatbot. It's um,
it's cool.
yeah, and try and force it not to make mistakes, which Perplexity does do.
Yeah, it gets a bit slapdash.
Okay, amazing. A really good conversation. Thank you so much, and good luck on everything.
Well, thank you for having me, and keep spreading the hope.
Sounds good. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.